On a recent question that we had on this particular video was the real estate math review questions, practice math for the real estate examination. One of our subscribers reached out to us and had an excellent question, and I want to kind of make a video about it because I think it's going to help. And it's Jane Zhao. And I wanted to, her question was, I'm confused with question number 5. Isn't listing agent and selling agent the same thing? If they split with the buyer's brokerage, I can understand.
So I call this question one of those questions where you need to know a bit about something else before. It's not just math, it's something else. So let's get into it and I'll teach you what I think might help you tremendously on an exam like this. All right. So to refresh, this question started with, Agent Nathan works for Home Hunters Realty. He lists a house for $725,000 with a 6% listing fee, which is to be split equally between Home Hunters Realty and the selling brokerage. If Nathan has a 70-30 split with his broker and the house sells for the full asking price, what is Nathan's earned commission on the sale? And we went through these. The answer, letter A, $65,25. Letter B, $15,225. Letter C, $21,750. And letter D, $30,450. And if we go through this, the answer, I'm just going to slide over here, is letter B, $15,225. And the question was, if Nathan has a 70-30 split with his broker and the house sells for the full asking price, and what is Nathan's earned commission on the sale? All right, so we've got this answer here, $15,225. So there's a couple of things here that we needed to talk about. So let's kind of talk about this. So this on its face looks like a math question, and it's really not. I mean, obviously the answer is mathematical, but the trick is in the wording, and this is where a lot of students have some difficulties with exams like this. It's like the wording they say is like kind of off. It's kind of weird. And there was a few things here where they kind of laid out some ambiguity, like the 70-30 split. So let's kind of get into that. First off, let's kind of go in there. I've kind of like made some flashcards for you here. So first things first, we had a house listing for $725,000 and the total commission was 6%. And if we multiply that out, so it's $725,000 times 0.06 and we get $43,500. Now that's the total commission that is on the table. Now, the test question says that it is split equally between the listing brokerage and the selling brokerage. So let's kind of go back to that. Agent Nathan works for Home Hunters Realty. So Nathan works for Home Hunters Realty. He lists a house for $725,000 with the 6% listing fee, which is to be split equally between Home Hunters Realty, remember, which Nathan works at, and the selling brokerage. So this phrase is deceptive. In addition to that, if Nathan has a 70-30 split. Now, when you see 70-30, 50-50, whatever, in a commission split, if nothing else is said, then it is to be assumed that the first number is the agent's cut and the second number is the broker's cut. So in this question, it says a 70-30 split. So the assumption here, and this is what the test writer wanted us to assume, and it's typically like this when you go to brokerage firms, 70-30. Obviously, when you walk into a brokerage firm, you always want to ask, hey, what's my split? What's my percentage of the split, etc. But typically, if nothing is said, then 70 goes to the agent and 30 goes to the house or the broker. Okay, so there was a little bit of kind of confusion here. And the listing fee, he lists a house. So Home Hunters Realty is a listing agent or a listing brokerage. They are listing the property for the seller, which makes anybody else selling the property or bringing a buyer to the table the buyer. Okay, so let's keep going here. The listing brokerage is House Hunters, and Nathan works here, and he gets a 70-30 split, and he, as we just learned, gets 70% of that. So the first number is what the agent gets for their commission. Okay. Next, some of the lingo here. Home hunters is being directly referred to as the listing company, aka also known as the seller's agent. So, another thing that you want to note is, depending on where you are and depending on who the test writer is, the test writer can be a little different, and their sort of explanation on the question might be a little obtuse. They might refer to the seller's agent as the listing company, the company that lists the property for the seller to sell the property so that they can earn a commission. So the listing company in this question is really the seller's agent. So if we were to look at a diagram, check this out. If we were to look at like a diagram, and like, what is the confusion? The confusion is, for many students that read this question, is the selling brokerage can be a buyer's brokerage or a sub-agent seller's brokerage. Well, what the heck does that even mean? So let's take a look at a diagram. See, this was a math question that many perceive to be just math, and it's really not. It's more than that. It's an agency-style question that really challenges the student to understand a couple of dynamics, like what's a selling brokerage? What's a listing brokerage? What's a seller's agent? So that, it kind of brings all of that old agency stuff into the mix. So let's kind of take a look at this. I did just a couple of diagrams for y'all. The thing here that you want to know is that single agency representation, we have seller's agency and we have buyer's agency and we have something called sub-agency. So there's actually 3 single agency representations. One is sellers, and in this test question, the seller's agency representing the seller is really also known as the listing agent. And that leaves the selling agent to be either a buyer's agency or a sub-agency. So if we were to look at it from a different perspective, here is what a seller's agent is. A seller's agent is an agent also known as the listing agent. And in this case, it's home hunters. And Nathan works at Home Hunters. And we know that Nathan gets 70% and Home Hunters gets 30% of their split. And they're representing the seller listing their property. So they owe the fiduciary obligation, cold AC, care, obedience, loyalty, disclosure, accounting, and confidentiality. They owe that to the seller. And any customers that are brought in are just owed the standard customer duty. Okay. Now, what they are doing is they are listing the property, and they are again listing it and charging a 6% listing fee to be split equally between the listing company, which is Home Hunters, and the selling brokerage. So here's some confusion. The selling brokerage can either be one of 2 parties. So the selling brokerage can be either a sub-agent, which is an agent working underneath the Home Hunters company. So it could be some third-party agency representing the seller. And Home Hunters is the agent on top of this agency. So this sub-agent can be some totally separate selling brokerage. So it could be like, let's say, Company A, right? So Company A is just some random company, and they're bringing a buyer to the transaction, but they're not representing that buyer. They're representing the seller that Home Hunters initially engaged. Okay. So sub-agency is a way, and we can call the sub-agent a seller, or we could take the same scenario here and we can take a buyer's agent. And the buyer's agent, as many of you may know, could bring a buyer to the transaction, and the buyer's agent can be representing the buyer, and they owe the fiduciary obligation to the buyer, but the buyer's agency can also be considered a seller's brokerage, the selling brokerage. So the selling brokerage could be a buyer's agent, or the seller's brokerage could be a sub-agent. No matter whom they are acting as an intermediary. So the question is, who is bringing the buyer to the transaction? Is it a firm that works for the seller, as in sub-agency? Or is it a firm that is representing the buyer's best interest, as in buyer's agency? But they are both still acting as the selling brokerage. In other words, they are bringing the seller a potential buyer. Okay, so that's what's going on in this question. So again, if we just look at the math from sort of a high level, I'll just kind of bring this in here, $725,000, and we take 6% of that, which is the listing fee total, and that's $43,500. It is to be split equally between both the listing firm and the selling brokerage, and now y'all know that the selling brokerage can be a buyer's agency or a sub-agent. Then we take that and split it by 2, and that gives us $21,750. So Home Hunters Realty, at which agent Nathan works for, is going to get to the house $21,750. Then House Hunters gets $21,000, and Nathan gets 70% of that. And the split, unless otherwise noted, remember, is 70%. The first number is to the agent, and 30% is to the brokerage firm. $21,750 is the total amount that goes to the firm, and 70% of that is Nathan's times 0.70 equals $15,225. And that is Nathan's commission. So this is a type of question that expects or challenges the student to try to understand a little bit about brokerage and agency. And once you understand that, then this question is relatively easy. And I hope this clarifies it. We had some excellent questions come in from students about this particular question, and I hope this really clarifies it. And I hope you have a wonderful examination and study and pass, and let us know in the comments. Hope you're all doing well, and we'll see you in the next one.